Mold is affecting millions of Americans, and most people don't even know it. I have suffered from mold toxicity with crazy brain fog, respiratory issues, nasal breathing, just garbage, many other symptoms. I'm sure you know. Oh, yeah, true. Thank you. Thanks. It probably wasn't even picked up on the mic, so we'll just continue to rock. I'll start over though. Mold toxicity is probably affecting millions of Americans. It's surely affected me with crazy brain fog, respiratory issues, nasal breathing just jacked, so many other symptoms. I mean, you see it probably every single day.
Yeah.
What is what
More
is
than more than millions, it's hundreds of millions of people. I mean, the EPA, they estimate that 50% of residential has water damage, and they estimate 85% of commercial buildings have water damage.
Oh my
And it
god.
doesn't take a massive water leak, a pipe burst to have a mold problem. If you simply
Okay.
have high humidity
Mm.
over a long period of time, you're going to develop mold in these buildings. And just a couple hundred years ago, we were outside 95% of our
Mm.
lives, and we were inside 5% in the farmhouse in the evening.
Mm.
Now we're inside on average, maybe not you and I, hopefully,
Right.
but on average, now we're inside 95% of the time. We're outside 5% of the time, and we've switched our building materials. Now we're
Mm.
using drywall, which is a brand new creation that has paper backing on it, which is the perfect food source for a mold to feed on. And when those
Mm.
molds are feeding on that, it's off gassing mycotoxins, which genetically, if you don't detox well, you build those up. These are carcinogenic. They damage your sperm quality. They affect the DNA of the sperm. They affect sperm motility. They affect the ovaries. They affect estrogen levels in females and males. So you could develop gyno. You could develop PMS. You could develop irritability. So this is a massive destroyer of health. And this is an epidemic problem. And the unfortunate thing is, if you just dial your nutrition in, which a lot of people do, it's not enough. You're
Right.
not going to eat your way out of this problem.
Mm. And you said just a small amount of mold can cause big issues.
Yeah, you could have on the size of a postage stamp, you could have a million spores.
Wow.
And if your immune system is already hyperactivated for this, it doesn't take a large
Mm.
bolus of this to create a problem. And you can travel with this mold, meaning, and we can measure this on your urine as well if you want to
Mm.
do some testing. But if we do an organic acids test, we can measure specific metabolites from these molds to determine whether you brought the mold with you. So if you're like,
Wow.
hey, Evan, I think I got exposed in this house, you go to that house, well, you could bring that with you because of the colonization.
Wow.
So we may end up needing to use herbal antifungals up your nose, in your gut to treat you
Wow.
because your environment could have been the problem, but you brought the environment with you.
Wow. I did not know any of that. That's mind blowing. So they just remediated my place yesterday, and they didn't find a lot of mold. But I'm so glad that you said that because honestly, I was like, damn, I wish y'all found a ton of mold because then it'd be like, oh, that's why I was having those symptoms. That's why I was having those problems. So,
Well,
yeah.
actually, that's a clue. So if you're saying, hey, environment looks decent, but I've still got these symptoms.
Mm.
And let's run through symptoms real quick for people as well. So if you were born in a moldy home, I just did a video that did pretty well the other day on what happens to a child when a mother is in a home during pregnancy with mold exposure.
Mm.
Those children end up with mycotoxins in their bodies. We've seen 2, 3-year-old children that we've tested in the practice. They're off the charts with mold. So
Oh
you
no.
potentially, you could have had this from your mom. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could have just accumulated it, 30 plus years of living. You could have accumulated this stuff over time. So it's not one exposure that may have broken you.
Mm.
You could have had this stuff brewing up. You go to this Airbnb and you travel to here and
Mm-hmm.
Costa Rica and all that, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
all these little exposures, it's like death by 1,000 exposures, right?
Wow.
So these mycotoxins will build up, and over time, depending on your digestion, depending on your gut bacteria, which may help break down these molds, depending on how often you're pooping, if your motility is good, depending on whether or not you're treating your sinuses or rinsing your sinuses, all those factors determine who can get exposed and be fine and who can get exposed and collapse.
Wow. That is wild. I did not know any of that. I didn't know that you could travel with it either.
Yep.
That's pretty crazy. Yeah, so I was gonna tell you about the Costa Rica trip, and my body was on a high. I was sleeping the best I ever had. I have the Oura ring, so I can kind of track different biometrics than I otherwise wouldn't. My sleep is really good. Readiness, my activity, super amazing. I get back to my condo in California. I had my windows closed the whole time, and so I think because of that, the mold was able to manifest itself into something that my body was like, oh crap, this is not normal. So I spent a couple weeks there after, and I was immense amount of nasal pain, congestion, brain fog, strength, appetite down, all that. So I started staying with my girlfriend and it started to get a little bit better. And I was like, there's something wrong. And I had my property management come in and test, and they were like, and you're going to laugh at this. Oh, we need 10 square feet of moisture for us to even look into this problem.
Oh, Jesus.
10 square feet, that's a lot. So you're saying a postage stamp, they're saying humongous amount.
Yeah, you could have a million spores on a postage stamp.
So I was like, this is not right. So I got an air quality test, and turns out that there's 3 times more mold in my room than there is outside. And they showed me like what types of spores and what the species were and
Let me
whatnot
guess,
of
if
the
you
strain.
remember. I'm going to guess probably Aspergillus,
Yes,
Penicillium, maybe Cladosporium or Alternaria.
those two, the top two you said.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Yeah, those are pretty common, and those are going to be your most common molds. And
Mm.
these molds, just to be clear on, like, is it really the mold making me sick? Technically, no. It's the mycotoxins they produce. Now,
Mm.
mold can make you sick when you're colonized, but what you're actually breathing in is the fart of the
Mm.
mold. Because so molds don't have teeth.
Okay.
They cannot bite other molds. And so let's just say we had a crazy plumbing leak in here. Okay, there's mold growing behind this wall here. Well, that Aspergillus goes, I want this wall. This is my wall.
Mm.
I'm going to put out these toxins that kill other molds.
Wow.
But you're just the innocent bystander that breathes it all in. And then you're saying here, like, if you had everything sealed up, and depending on your air filtration in your home, and how, if you're running your air conditioner or not, like if you turn up the air to save money, like, I'm gone, I don't need to
Right.
run, I don't need to put it at 74 degrees or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that alone, even just not running your AC enough, that humidity can build up. So it's not like, oh, I had a pipe burst. No, you don't have to have a pipe burst to have this problem.
Interesting. Wow. So yeah, I've never had my windows fully sealed before, especially for 3 weeks at a time. So that's when I like came back and I was like, oh whoa, there's a weird smell. This is like totally off. And then of course, spending the night there, like,
Did you have vertigo at all? Any kind of dizziness stuff?
I feel like I did minorly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it affects the vestibular system. So, I mean, my story with mold toxicity, I was working clinically for a decade with gut issues. Like, that was my bread and butter: parasites, bacterial overgrowth, candida problems. And then my wife and I, we built a brand new house. It was in 2017.
Yeah.
We built the house together. And shortly upon moving in there, I started waking up dizzy every day.
Hmm.
And I'm like, this is freaking weird.
Oh
And
no.
so then my blood pressure goes up. I'm like, I'm too young for blood pressure. This is weird. So I texted a friend of mine. He's a cardiologist. I'm like, hey man, waking up dizzy. You're the only guy like who could help me. My heart feels weird. Like, what the hell? And he texts back one word: mold.
Oh.
I'm like, really? It's brand new construction. There's no way. I was in denial. Okay, like, I was in this denial phase, which is very common with mold because it's overwhelming financially. The financial burden, the testing.
Mm.
People think you're crazy. Your doctor thinks you're crazy. And so, fortunately, I had the right people to point me in the direction of urine testing. And sure enough, there it was in the urine.
Wow.
And so I just want to encourage people, like, if you feel like you're getting gaslit by practitioners and they're blowing this off, this is not a rare problem.
Yeah.
I would say I've tested probably at least 3,000 people. I would say 80 to 90% of the people that have chronic fatigue, anxiety, depression, insomnia of any kind. So, like, you wake up exhausted, you're not refreshed after
Mm-hmm.
sleep. Maybe you have dark circles under your eyes. Even guys your age and younger, erectile dysfunction, females with anxiety, panic attacks,
Mm.
irritability, PMS because of the estrogenic like effect of these mycotoxins. Any and all of these symptoms you could chase: probiotic for the gut issue, adaptogenic herb for the fatigue, maybe pharmaceutical antidepressant for the depression, right?
Mm.
But you're not getting to this. And so this thing affects every body system.
Wow. That's crazy. That's crazy. It's that common. What is the first thing that someone should do if they suspect that they have mold?
Well, so a couple things. We'll go cheap and then we'll go more expensive.
Okay.
So the cheap thing we could do are some petri dishes.
Okay.
So we can give people a link, but their petri dish is like $3.
I did this off
Okay.
of Amazon Prime, and yeah, I put it, I had like 10 petri dishes and put it, select areas, and then I had a lot. I had a different types of mold growing in and all that kind
That's
of
right.
stuff. So
That's right. So petri dishes are great because on average they're about $3 a pop. And so you could do the petri dishes, and you're gonna let those sit out for an hour.
Mhm.
You're gonna put the lid on, mark them master,
Mhm.
kitchen, whatever. And then after about 5 days, you're gonna take a look and see what grows.
Mhm.
Now, if you've done enough of these, you can learn that's that, and that's that kind of mold. But you can also send it to the lab.
Okay.
That's cheap. More expensive, run the urine.
Okay.
$300-400.
Okay. Gotcha. And then what?
Well, it depends if you're colonized. We might have to use antifungals.
Okay. What is that?
So there are conventional medical doctors that are what are called shoemaker trained.
Okay.
Richie Shoemaker is an MD who trained a lot of medical doctors, and I don't like those. I like herbs. So we can use Paul d'Arco, French tarragon, tinospora. We could use thyme. We could use oregano. We could use berberine, golden seal, uh, garlic. These herbs all knock the fungal colonization down.
Wow.
So you probably heard of binders, right?
Yes.
Charcoal being popular. That is only going to grab onto the toxin. It's not going to treat the mold. So you got to have the antifungals to kill the mold if it's growing in you. And then you got to go clean up the mitochondria that's damaged. You got to go help the neurotransmitters. So ochratoxin, you probably have ochratoxin. I'll bet you $1,000,000.
Okay.
Ochratoxin comes from aspergillus.
Okay.
Go in PubMed. Ochratoxin, dopamine. It lowers it.
Wow.
Everybody with mold has low dopamine.
Wow.
Energy issues, focus, concentration, addicted to your phone. Like, this is so common, and nobody has a freaking clue.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so you either do a pee test, a petri dish test, and then you go after. I mean, what do you do with the home situation? You know, what if renting? It's almost better because I force it on the owner. Be like, hey, you got to clean this shit up, or else kind of.
The problem is when you're in the renting situation, though, they're going to do the cheapest thing, right?
100%. I had 3 people. I had a team of 4, and they showed up all in enterprise rental vans yesterday. I'm like, oh god, this is not going to go good. And then it's just like one of them spoke English. I'm like, oh no. So
Yeah.
it's the cheapest route.
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate thing about rental versus ownership. Is ownership you can do it right. Renting, you're hoping the landlord does the right thing, but the right thing may cost 5 times more, and it may be 5 times more invasive. They'd like to just paint over it.
Of course. Yep.
They like to spray it with something, kill it with bleach. Doesn't work. It's a total myth. It just pisses the molds off. 12% hydrogen peroxide works though.
Okay, I heard vinegar. Is that not true?
Very mild.
Okay.
Not strong enough. You need hydrogen peroxide, 12% or greater, 12 to 18%. You can get that on Amazon. You can get that from a pool supply store. The hydrogen peroxide, if your question, so you and I are talking here at this, looks like a real wood desk. If this was moldy, okay, we had suspicion maybe there was a spot of mold right here. If we hit that with hydrogen peroxide, if it fizzes or foams, it's an act of microbial growth. Okay, so if you question something, you're like, that looks weird, go ahead and hit it. If nothing happens, you're good.
Wow.
So, but a lot of times the more invasive strategy is needed because if this is something behind your walls, for example,
And that's what most people, right?
Yeah.
It's behind. You don't see it
you don't
visually
see it.
sometimes.
That's right. You got to
Yeah,
rip the walls off, but drywall's cheap. Insulation's cheap. It's the labor. Labor's kind of high,
of course.
but it's not bad. And the truth is, if you go and spend a couple grand to do all this, you've saved yourself from cancer. This is a carcinogenic thing, okay? So these things do cause cancer. Aflatoxin causes liver cancer. Ochratoxin damages the cerebellum. There's a guy I've done some talks with named Dr. Dale Bredesen, who's an MD. He wrote the book called The End of Alzheimer's. Him and I have given some talks to Mosaic Lab, that's the lab we use for the urine, about the connection between mold and Alzheimer's and dementia and Parkinson's and all these neurodegenerative diseases. So think about, you go to a nice assisted living facility, depending on where you live, you're looking at 5 to 10K a month to live there, okay? So it's like we're trying to save you from that when you're 60, 70,
Right.
80 by fixing this now. We're helping females with fertility issues. IVF is not cheap. And IVF, you're basically like forcing a baby, but fertility is a side effect of being healthy.
Right.
Okay, so if you're having a miscarriage, that could be mold as well.
Wow.
A little bit of a tangent, but like I just want people to understand how what they're going through now could be tangentially related, like a fertility issue, a mood problem, bipolar, anxiety, panic attacks, dizziness in my case, erectile dysfunction in men. I mean, you know how many guys our age are doing Cialis and Viagra.
So sad.
Here's the deal. Mold affects nitric oxide synthase, the enzyme that's going to help you with nitric oxide production. So we can do things, natural vasodilators, arginine, citrulline. We can do things to help increase blood flow, lumbrokinase, other enzymes to vasodilate and help blood flow, help with what's called hypercoagulability. So mold actually is going to create this hypercoagulability where your blood is not flowing as well. So we can do natural things to support you, but ultimately we got to get this stuff out of you. And in most cases, a year is the minimum timeline
Wow.
of binders.
What does that year look like in just a general sense?
Yeah, well, so month 1, we get your labs. So you collect the urine, you send it back. A few weeks later, we get results. Jump on a call, go through it, get your protocol made up, see if you're colonized or not. That's really like the big fork in the road for you. It's like, okay, is he colonized or does he just have mold in him? So let me just explain the difference real quick and set it another way. Are you a mold factory or just a reservoir? 2 different situations, and you could be both. You could be growing it and storing the mycotoxins, or you could just have the mycotoxins, right? So if you're growing it, that's a whole nother layer of complexity to the protocol now, because now we've got to actually kill it, because you could move out and you're still going to stay sick. And so we get that protocol rolling. Usually we'll run it for about 3 months, check in, see how you're feeling. 6 to 12 months, do a retest and see how everything looks. And you're gradually going to get better, 5 to 10% improvement each month. I tell people though that sometimes they can take 2 years.
Mm.
I mean, it took me a while, man. I'll tell you, it probably took me 4 years to
Oh
really
my
feel
god.
like I've really, really pulled through. Now,
Wow.
this is a little geeky, but I think we should go here. Before we hit record, we were talking about Bartonella.
Mm-hmm.
You growing up in Florida and all that, and so mosquitoes transmit Bartonella, which is a common bacteria that's under-recognized, underdiagnosed. Bartonella triggers the mast cells. Have you heard of mast cell activation?
No.
Okay, have you heard of histamine intolerance?
Yes.
Okay, so histamine intolerance pretty widespread. So mast cells are a type of white blood cell. It's full of histamine, tryptase, and many other inflammatory cytokines. Now, when you get exposed to, say, mosquito bites as a kid, or maybe you had a cat, a lot of
Okay.
cats can transmit Bartonella. Okay,
Is that both?
yeah, call it cat scratch fever.
Okay.
All right, so you can get Bartonella there. Now, that's already pissed off your mast cells. MAST is what I'm saying, mast
Okay.
cells. Okay, so these mast cells, now think of it as a balloon in your body full of histamine.
Okay.
And as you get infections, viral, bacterial, fungal, those mast cells get more holes in them essentially. You're leaking histamine into your system. Now you can't handle an avocado, you get a headache. You can't do pineapple, it's too high histamine. You can't do leftovers, you can't do fish. Now you have histamine intolerance from these mast cells that are leaky. So the problem and how people really end up deeper in the hole with mold illness is if they had pre-existing Lyme disease, if they've had
Mm.
pre-existing Bartonella. So me, I'm a hunter, I'm out in the woods, I've had tick bites, I've had tons of tick bites. You're going to get Lyme, you're going to get Bartonella, you're going to get Babesia. All those things do is piss off the immune system.
Mm.
So now you are more susceptible to mold. Because one question you may have and others may have is, well, why do I feel this way? And my dad, my mom, my brother, my sister, my wife, my partner, why are they fine? And so then you're the crazy guy, right? Like you're just like
Yeah.
you're just a pussy. Like
Why is
what's
that?
what's wrong with you? Well, they they might not have all those other pre-existing things in the bucket.
Ah.
So right, so your bucket is already so full you can't handle it. And then
Mm.
depending on what's going on with your gut as well. Let me see your fingernails.
I think I have a zinc deficiency with.
Well, you see some of the ridging in your nails here too.
Yes. Yep.
So you've definitely got some malabsorption problems. I mean, this amount of vertical ridging is not good in the nails. So
Mm.
I would definitely say we would probably want to look at your gut as well and do a stool on you,
Mm-hmm.
because what can happen with the mold, it basically weakens your defenses is the best way to put it to you.
Right.
It's going to lower your immune system's ability to keep pathogenic bacteria at bay. And one particular species or group of bacteria called Clostridia, I'm going to paint the domino effect for you, okay?
Okay.
So when you have that mold exposure, that's weakening the immune system. We can see there's some malabsorption in your nails. So now we know that your gut bacteria are going to be shifted more towards a pathogenic overgrowth or dysbiotic flora, dysbiotic microbiome. Now the problem is these Clostridia bacteria can mess up an enzyme called dopamine beta hydroxylase, meaning now you're not going to have the proper conversion of neurotransmitters.
Mm.
So this is where anxiety, OCD, irritability, panic, all that stuff sets in. So now you're seeing, not only do you have potentially a digestive issue, maybe some diarrhea, loose stool, you could have the mood issues as well. Now, as those infections continue to grow, they're robbing you of your nutrients, creating more nutrient deficiencies, creating more neurotransmitter imbalances. Now you don't have enough nutrients to fuel the Krebs cycle, so now you end up with chronic fatigue. So you see how quickly four,
Yes.
five, six different diagnoses pile up on you.
Yes. Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. That's wild. Okay, and you can do all this, but if you're still living in your home that has mold, it's not going to do anything.
Good question. That's a very important question too, right? Because like everything I'm saying is like, oh my God, do I move? Do I tear that place down? Like, what do I
Mhm.
do? I think of it as a seesaw. So if you've got this really big guy on one side of the seesaw and you're on the other side, you're going to lose. And what I mean with that visualization, if your rate of exposure
Mm-hmm.
is the big guy,
Mm-hmm.
your rate of detox is nothing, you're going to lose, man.
Mm.
But if we can get you balanced, or maybe you're still getting exposed, but we've got some binders on board, we've got specific probiotic strains to help neutralize some of the mold toxins, we've got Saccharomyces on board to help bind to some of this, we've upregulated your liver, we've got your gallbladder releasing more bile, we're improving digestive function, we're treating your sinuses. Now this is a more balanced situation. So can you fully heal in a moldy environment? It's going to be challenging. But could you at least hold steady or maybe make some progress and not collapse? Yes.
Okay, that's huge. That's huge. Wow. That's a lot of mold information. I freaking love it.
Yep.
Yeah, so to put it simple, you need to figure out if you have mold in your place, so get a petri dish test, or you can get a urine test. And then after that, you're going to start to work on all the other things that, you know, combined with that have the domino effect of that.
Yeah, I mean, test don't guess is my whole philosophy. I mean, I've said that
Mm,
for a decade now because I was guessing with my health for a long time, and I was taking random probiotics, I was
mm,
taking random nutrients. Like I heard about this, I heard about that. Let me go ahead and just like fill in the blanks. Right, colostrum, like that's
mm-hmm.
like friggin' viral, right?
Yeah,
They're doing crazy
trendy,
business on colostrum. It's like
crazy.
okay, so the marketing is like, I guess what's the main pitch? Like healing your gut.
Right, yeah.
It's like, okay, but here's the deal. If you're full of a toxin that's going to disrupt the gut barrier, it's been shown to increase the permeability of your gut.
Mm-hmm.
You could do colostrum all day. Maybe you'll hold steady, but you're not fixing the root cause.
Mm,
So I don't care how much probiotic, colostrum, whatever you do, seed, all these other things you see out there, these trendy products that
mm-hmm.
got real big, greens, powders, whatever. Like that stuff is not fixing what we're talking about here.
No.
That's why I said early on, like you cannot eat your way out of this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you can supplement your way out of it, but it's got to be targeted towards what is wrong with you. And
Mm,
specific binders target specific mycotoxins. So we even get to that level of specificity because someone could just go take charcoal, but charcoal doesn't work on all binders.
mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, charcoal doesn't work on all mycotoxins, meaning if you have ochratoxin, charcoal might work good for that. But if you have one called zearalenone, this is a massive issue for females. It really screws up their hormones, their
Mm.
cycles. They could have miscarriages. They could have irregular bleeding. They could have bleeding between periods. They could have just a loss of period completely. Charcoal doesn't work as good for that mycotoxin. So that's why when you get the data, you're going to know specifically what toxin do you have and then how do we match the appropriate binders to that toxin. That's where you get laser focused and you're not taking 20 supplements, you're
Mm.
taking maybe 5 or 6.
Test, don't guess.
Yeah.
Wow, I like that a lot. Yeah, and I honestly had no idea about blood testing, urine testing, stool testing until a couple years ago, and now I'm like actually doing it because yeah, I want to figure this shit out.
Yeah.
I'm tired of it, you know.
It's
And
it's a game changer, man. And it's going to pay dividends for you as well. I mean, the money that you invest into that, it's not a huge amount. Like you
mm-hmm.
could buy a new iPhone for 1,000, or you could spend 1,000 and get some pretty good data on your body that's going to reveal why you felt this way.
Mm,
And the truth is, my pitch to people is like, I'm actually going to help you make more money because
mm-hmm.
I'm going to improve your productivity. I'm going to increase your energy levels. I'm going to improve your sleep quality because
Yes.
mold affects melatonin production.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I couldn't sleep for a long time. I tried herbs, cannabis, whatever I needed
Yeah.
to do to try to sleep, and the mold was screwing up the sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm actually helping you make more money because I'm helping you be more productive, more successful during your waking hours
Mm-hmm.
because now you're not brain fogged. You
Yeah.
can actually stay dialed in for 6 hours on your work and you're not going to crash. And this is for entrepreneurs, for pilots. I mean, I've helped pilots that they're scared that they're going to lose their pilot license because they have so much vertigo. I had a helicopter pilot who almost crashed his helicopter because he was so dizzy during a flight. He had major mold.
Oh,
And this was a guy in Florida. His job was to operate a helicopter saw. So he actually trims like trees and stuff on the sides of power lines and highways
wow.
from a helicopter. This dude's flying with a flying
Sick.
chainsaw with
Hello,
mold,
Florida. You
with
know.
mold in his brain.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
damn, that's crazy. So where can people work with you? Where can they find you?
sure.
Yeah, how do
Thank you for the opportunity.
okay.
EvanBrand.com is the site. You could just Google Evan Brand. You'll see the podcast called The Evan Brand Show. It's been out there for 12 plus years. We've had 28 million plus downloads of it. It's all free content. We talk just like this. We interview other practitioners. It's mainly functional medicine based. We have done some naturopaths. Naturopaths and functional medicine are different. Naturopath is more like, hey, you have a headache. Here is boswellia instead of ibuprofen.
Okay.
But functional medicine is going to go, why do you have a headache?
Mm.
So that's the difference. It's not
Okay.
just a supplement for a pain. It's what's the root
The
cause.
root, yeah.
And so that's the difference. And then clinically, I do telemedicine, so it's all virtual. People
That's
can
so
reach
cool.
out, and those are the main things. I have a course as well, like on healthy homes. I teach you about EMF and mold in your house. So I've got tons of resources.
That's really cool.
I'm just trying to help people, man. There's so many people suffering, children as well. That's where my heart is. Probably half my practice is children, and it's kids that they are given a diagnosis of ADD, ADHD. They're put on these stimulants, and I just did a video about this a couple weeks ago. So it turns out that the stimulants, like an Adderall, it's causing cardiomyopathy, a weakening of the heart, potentially leading to heart failure. Now,
Stuff like that we preached to the past few years
yeah,
to get to.
this is true. This is true. So viral issues as well are keeping people locked in a state of immune system suppression, and there is persistent spike proteins floating around in the body that's creating issues with coagulation, and so that's affecting blood flow as well. So if you stack mold with potential viral issues,
Stimulants.
you see, yeah, and then stimulants, yeah. I mean, you see why we're in a chronic health epidemic right now.
And then not to mention our foods. Half our food's poison.
Unfortunately,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
crazy.
If you look at you ever looked up a USA glyphosate map?
I mean, it's the whole thing, right?
No, luckily not.
Thank God. But
Yeah,
where's it not?
probably actually here where we are in the coast. I mean, you can't grow corn over here, can't grow soybean over here, but the entire Midwest, most of the South is okay. Where I am on the coast down
Yeah.
there is a safe place to be.
Wow.
But where I grew up in Kentucky was
They're tilling the hell out of the soil and just
it's
spraying.
heavily contaminated. Hundreds of millions of pounds of glyphosate are being sprayed. Hundreds of millions of pounds on this country. And here's the problem, though, man. Here's the scary part. Okay, and this is like a whole can of worms. They did a study in the Rocky Mountains. Okay, you're thinking it's pristine, right? Rocky Mountain National Park in Colorado.
Right.
They found the glyphosate in the water and air samples in an area where humans have never even stepped foot.
Wow.
So this is why you really have to detox or die in a way. Like I've had a friend that's used that saying detox or die. It sounds a little extreme, but even in the most pristine places, you could potentially have airborne contamination. Even if you're trying to eat organic, I still see people with glyphosate in their bodies. Now, how do we tie this into mold and overall toxicity? I'd like to riff on glyphosate for a sec here too, because
Please.
so we can measure that in urine, and every child on the spectrum, we see elevated levels of glyphosate. So there's a massive correlation there because of the way it affects the brain, because of the way it affects the gut bacteria. So parts per billion, okay, ppb of glyphosate affects the good microbes. And these good bacteria help us to make B vitamins. These good bacteria help us to make and synthesize neurotransmitters. So when we're seeing kids or adults that have issues where they can't focus, they have behavioral outbursts, they have rage, they have irritability, they have anger, there's violence in the marriage, I've saved marriages by investigating their chemical toxicity and removing that. And the cool thing is, some of the similar binders we use for mold can actually help with chemicals. So we can measure glyphosate, we can measure 2,4-D, all these other pesticides. We can measure hair dye chemicals, nail polish chemicals.
Wow.
Also, I can't test for this yet, but another tangential thing here, Botox. So we talked about histamine intolerance and mast cell activation. I'm starting to get more and more women in their 20s and 30s getting Botox. Number one, I think you shouldn't need Botox in your friggin' 20s.
No.
Like you should be peak beauty right there. Your collagen production, everything should be fine. But it's appearing that these women that are reacting to Botox, they have mold. So it's almost like the mold has already aggravated their immune system so much. It's a botulinum toxin, right? So you're literally basically like giving botulism. I know there's some like dermatologists out there or esthetician debunking what I'm saying, but it is a toxic bacteria that's creating an inflammatory response to create that wrinkle softening effect in Botox. But now I'm getting all these women clinically. They're like, hey, I can't breathe since I got Botox. I'm having shortness of breath since I got Botox. What the hell's going on? And I'm just for curiosity, I'm running their urine and they all have mold.
Wow.
So all I'm saying here is these things that add up in your toxic bucket make you more susceptible. So if you do these little interventions for beauty, you might actually set yourself up for disaster. Breast implants, that's crazy too. We can go a whole hour on breast implants.
I know 3 women recently over the past few months that got the explant done.
I did an interview with a surgeon who's done like, I don't know, 15,000 explants or something like that. He actually kind of corrected me though. I was thinking that it was mold, like you were actually growing mold colonization around the capsule of it, but he claims that it's a bacteria. But I will just say that all the women that have had breast implant illness, they all test positive for mold.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's just a correlation. They were already sick. Their immune system couldn't handle the implant. It's a foreign object. I mean, no duh.
Right.
But yeah, so mold, it's snuck its way into like every single part of my practice. Ever since I got sick from it, I'm like, oh, it affects the brain. Oh, it affects fertility. Oh, it affects gut. Oh, it affects acne. It affects the skin. It affects the gut microbiome. Like this is crazy. And so I think this is something that everyone should be considering if they've suffered and they've been doing the runaround. Most people have been to 5, 10, 15 doctors before they call me.
Jeez.
And they haven't looked there.
Wow.
Right, you went to Mayo Clinic, they didn't look there. You went to Cleveland Clinic, they didn't look there. You went to XYZ Hospital, you went to Kaiser, they didn't help you. No.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Dude, thank you so much, Angel,
man, my pleasure.
for mold and everything in between, dude. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I'm stoked to learn from you for
My
real,
pleasure,
and a
man.
lot of other people will.
Yeah, hell yeah, bro.
Heck yeah.
My pleasure, man.
Thank you, brother.